All right, hello YouTube, hello Facebook, and we're almost there. Hello Instagram in a second. I hope you're having a great Monday so far. Thank you everyone for jumping in. And yes, Startup Business Q&A episode 98. So thanks very much for to everyone who's coming in today. So many questions actually about some really differing subjects. It's gonna be really good fun. I think that we'll just wait a couple of minutes whilst Instagram decides to wake up, and maybe I'll give it another shot. But the big thing today is that we've got hijacks happening starting today from the Facebook group. So if you're not involved already in the Facebook group, go to facebook.com/groups/entrepreneur business group, and you can join for free. And you can see that for the next 10 days, members of the group will be sharing value in like mini TED Talks, like 10, maybe 15 minutes of sharing a bit of value. It's gonna be really good fun. And yeah, everyone can jump in and watch them. Do support people. The first one today is Lewis Clack. He's gonna be hitting off from 2:30, I think it is, so in about an hour or so from now. But those of you who've sent through questions already, thanks so much for doing so. For some reason, we're having problems getting online with Instagram. Let me know where you're coming from, though, where you're calling or listening in from. And I'd love to see who's online. At the moment, we've got quite a few people jumping in on Facebook and also on YouTube as well. Eventually, we might have Instagram, but who knows? It's technical, so there we go. So a few things happening. We are this close. I'm not there yet, but this close to being able to nail down a date for you. If you're in London or able to get to London, probably in about a month or so, for the first Entrepreneur Business Live, which will be speakers and networking, a live event in London. I will stream it. So that's the news. I will be streaming it so everyone on Facebook can watch the speakers, and obviously the networking is a bit pointless to stream, but it'll be a great event for you there. In addition to that, the LinkedIn course. So many people are asking about this every single day. The LinkedIn course is finally finished. It's being uploaded. The website is almost set. So I'm hoping to launch it on Monday next week. And there will be a basically anyone who watches the stream live will be able to get a special rate on the course, but otherwise you can jump in and use it right away. The other thing as well is if you're not hooked up with me on LinkedIn, please jump in as soon as you can. I really would love that to be a great place for us to connect because LinkedIn at the moment is really popping, but also we're doing a really fun scheme at the moment, which is called 10 Tips, 10 Days. So across 2 weeks, really, because I didn't do the weekend, there are 10 tips, and I'm taking the subject area of introverts and shy and nervous salespeople. So if you want to join in there, if you feel like that resonates with you, I've already done 5 last week, and the latest post is going to come out straight after this live stream today. So let's get on with the questions. So the first one today is from Rich Decker, and he's written, how do you create revenue in unique ways, specifically for startup media companies? Well, I think that's obviously a very broad question, Rich. One thing I think for sure is that when you're starting up, you need to be agile. What I mean by that is you need to find your place. And it might be that you know you're quite good on, say, Snapchat or Instagram or leveraging LinkedIn or SEO or whatever it might be, but it's clear that you don't know until you've tried. And one thing I've learned, and I was thinking about this a lot earlier today, is that if you're working on a startup business, you really need to be willing to be agile. And what I mean by that is bringing variety. Like what things can I do, rather than just focusing necessarily on one thing, and being willing to say to people, yeah, I can do that, or yeah, I can do that, and doing different things for different customers, because then you'll really find your feet. You'll realize what you are good at, maybe what you're not so good at. And that's not to suggest you do completely different things, but within that space, you offer a raft of opportunities and options for people. Otherwise, you might silo yourself a bit when, in fact, you could do something else quite well. So I think it's a good way of doing it. But creating revenue in unique ways, I mean, what it comes down to is if you share yourself enough and your style of content comes through, if people love that, for whatever it is that it's unique, that whatever it is about it that's unique, then that's the thing you can focus on as being your thing. I don't think you need to overthink it too much in terms of trying to be unique. It's unnecessary. You just got to be great, okay? A lot of people do exactly the same thing as me, But as long as you're great, people will respond to that and they'll pick you rather than someone else. There are plenty of people who are better than you, and that will always be the case because it's a perception. But as long as you do something that's, all about delivering in your way with your values and as authentic as possible, you can't really go far wrong doing it with that kind of approach. So a big question, that one to start with, but I do think being agile, as in being willing to see what the entry level or first clients want and then responding to that would be a really good idea. Hello, everyone on Facebook. So as is Bethany, Bruno, Damien, Peter, Zach, Alex, and so on. Thanks, everyone here for jumping in. And if you have any questions, I asked yesterday, I've had so many, I'm not going to be able to get through them all today, I think, but I will do my best to answer any afterwards by text on the post itself on Facebook if I don't miss any. So next question from Zach Houston. How do you scale when you are your business's unique selling point? I'm very qualified to answer this, Zach, because I recently had this issue. And I had this issue because it was with the Taekwondo school. So the Taekwondo school, those of you who know, I've been a coach, training in Taekwondo for 19 and a half years, coaching for 14, and I had my own school for 4. However, I decided recently to actually stop altogether. And I did that simply because, hello, Instagram, you've woken up finally. I did that because I was having to say no to so many very important opportunities. I was also having to say no on occasion to family, okay, because I've got to go and teach. And that was a decision, it was a very difficult decision to make. And you guys have got to be willing to do this. Just as an aside, you've got to be willing to, there's a saying which is you've got to be willing to kill your babies, which sounds dreadful, right? But the point is that you've got to be willing to say, even though this is something that's been part of the furniture for a long time, remember, 19 and a half years of Taekwondo, that's half my life, okay? So to stop it, it's not going to be based on whimsy. It had to be a really important decision, well made. And I did it because I knew it was the best thing for my family, for my business, and ultimately then for myself. It was hard, and obviously people were crying and things like that. But ultimately, hello, Chloe, hello, MLN, World Traveler, hello, Motivational Quotes 07J. All of you guys, thanks for jumping on Instagram. But the point there is that you can be willing to let it go. Another thing that's happened recently is with the 8-step startup course, I've actually decided I'm going to hold off releasing it. And I think I will probably not release it now. In a pivot, I mean, those that have access, and that's that. But I've decided maybe it doesn't best represent me anymore. And as a result, I want to leave it to one side. Tough when you spend a year building that thing, but it's important to let things lie if you feel that's the way you need to go. All is to say, Zach, to answer your question, I was finding it really difficult. Hello, Henna, on Instagram. It was very difficult to join in, to sell the Taekwondo school because it had students, it had a venue, it had a recurring income every month. That's great. But they weren't coming for Taekwondo so much as they were coming for me. Sounds really arrogant, but the reality is if you're coaching and instructing, they like the way you do it. And unless someone can duplicate that, it's not entirely the same. And I think that when I offered it to a couple of the black belts, would you like to take it over? And they were like, it's not really our thing to instruct. It's like, well, it has to go then. And if you are the reason why people are buying your service, that's a wonderful thing. But quite right, Zach, it's very difficult to scale that. For instance, the company I'm going to see tomorrow, they're paying for my experience, but they're also paying for my delivery of that. And I could package a lot of that experience. I could formulate it, and I could create a franchise where people could go and do sales training, for example. However, it can only be done to a certain degree because actually it's me they're buying to a degree. But let's look at this practically speaking, because the reality is that some people are going to be cool with it not being you, Zach. So for instance, with the sales training, I could package it and it isn't me doing it, but someone else could teach it. And it's the philosophy of how Richard Moore would sell. And as long as you can make peace, this is the same with a VA or a salesperson or someone representing you, as long as you can make peace with someone doing something at maybe 70% or 75% the efficacy or quality of delivery that you would, then actually that's okay. And that's how you could scale it. There are other alternatives, of course, things like make a course scale it in a way in which you don't have to be there. The LinkedIn course is literally about to go out as a perfect example of that. So what we've got there is a case of saying, you know, everyone's asking me all the time. I had someone this morning say, could you give me some tips for LinkedIn? I'm like, well, yeah, if I had all the time in the world, but I can't sit down with everyone individually. Not because I don't want to, it's just literally not practical. So by having a course, everyone gets access to me, and it, you know, it delivers what I would say, but that's a very scalable approach to it. So for instance, in the last week, several people were buying basics of sales and Monetize You. They're all getting access to me, but just, you know, that's the way I'd scale it. So perhaps try and get your philosophy or you down on paper, and then ask yourself, could I have someone deliver at least the values here? And if it's not with your delivery, that might be okay. Or you might need to find people who have your kind of style of delivery, or embrace that other people's delivery is just as good. Again, as long as the values or philosophy are matching, you know, your kind of outlook. So I think that's very realistic. But I mean, in order to have done it with my Taekwondo Academy, it would have had to be someone who maybe coaches in the same way as me. I could have built a kind of an academy of instructors and sent them out into the world to do my thing, but it's just not a pivot point I decided to take. But that would have been one way around it, for example. But yeah, very good question, Zach. It's difficult, and it's something to consider all the time, because it's not about if you want to spin off the business or sell it. It's actually because you need to think about what happens if you're ill or out of action for whatever reason. It's literally a month from now, in 30 days, in fact, I'm having an operation. Okay. So I can't work that day, and probably for 3 or 4 days afterwards, I'm not going to be feeling so great. So if I was to, you know, I simply can't be there. If I did have someone who could take the reins, that's a good idea. So it's a consideration. If you're a solopreneur and you're in a place where stuff really needs you, then you need to start asking yourself, well, how much of that stuff could be passed over to someone else? A good example today is I was in touch with a business who is based in the States. It's a 2-person business. One person's in the States and the other person is based over, I think, in the Philippines. And she covers like the hours when he's tucked up in bed. And that's a kind of a micro version of it, because she gets the general idea about what he's trying to achieve. So that's one way of looking at it, I suppose. So Zach, you've just mentioned a question in here, a point in here. Follow on from scaling. I'm okay with it. My client's not convinced they will be okay with it. Well, what you can do is, if your clients are tight with you, you can bring someone in with you. Get them acculturated. I'm going through this process with someone I work with. I'm going to be seeing tomorrow, and they've had an their clients have had an account manager for like 8 or 9 years. They've got so much business now that account manager has to move up. And so someone else, the guy underneath him, is taking the reins, and all the clients obviously are going, you know, who's this guy? You know, why are you calling me? And, you know, where's the other one gone? And, but it takes a bit of time just to get into bed with them. And if you can convince them and be okay, maybe give them some kind of offer and say, look, try it for a month, and you know, and you'll see we don't drop the ball at all. That actually may work. What you need to do is work on the relationship and give these guys an opportunity to, you know, to kind of test the guy out, I suppose. That's one way around it. Ultimately, not everyone's gonna be happy with it. Like I said, without question, there were some students I had who weren't there for Taekwondo. Could have been karate, could have been wrestling. They were there for the delivery of it. Some are just there socially, you know, and unless you could recreate that, they're just not going to stick. But you're just going to be willing to lose some people as well. Like with any change of direction, same in fact, when I changed a payment or fee structure for one of my academies a while back, and a couple of people had a problem with it. It was like, sorry, okay, so don't train then. And you know, there's not much you can do with it, because the masses are going to have to deal with this slight change in fee payment structure. And in the end, they all fell in line. And if you lose a few people, well, you know, as long as you feel that you're doing it for the right reasons, then you've got to be willing to do that. And maybe that's a consideration, because ultimately, if it means you don't have to be there and you lose a couple of customers, but then you can always get more, well, maybe that's something worth doing. So a difficult one, but it's something we can maybe talk more about in the future. Thanks everyone else for jumping in. Hussein, David, Bob, Jimmy Lee, Rafino, Venu, William, Nadine, and Laura. Hello. Laura, you asked me a question. Let's get on to yours next. Laura Brownlett Wilkerson has asked, Richard, what financial pulse would you have a startup view weekly, monthly, and quarterly to start in the industry? I'm not entirely sure what you mean. I think you possibly are asking me, Laura, my goodness, a lot of you there. That's a really good question. You've mentioned as a startup, one thing I would say is that there should be a daily focus on finances, because there's so much fun involved in looking at the talent you've got and building something around it, and building your new product and maybe polishing a few spreadsheets and things like that here and there. But ultimately, it's important to remember that the oxygen for your startup is customers. And one thing I've always suggested people when they say, what are your tips for startups and so on, is every day you've got to ask yourself the question. This is probably a big takeaway, I suppose. Every day you've got to ask yourself the question, where is my next customer coming from? Because there was a saying I think I heard years ago, which is, even if you close your best prospect, you've just lost your best prospect, because now they're a client, right? So you need someone new. And I think you've always got to ask them, where's the next one coming from? Because that you never know when things are going to go wrong. You never know when people might decide to move on, or things might go great and you have more customers, right? But the point is, if you do it every day, it's important. But it's the same for finances. I would say it's intelligent every day to jump in to your financial spreadsheet or situation, just see where you're at, because you don't want any surprises coming over the horizon. And one thing I found for sure from going from a corporate space when I had to manage a P&L sheet to my own is that I loved knowing what was coming over the horizon. That's a very, very important way of working, because there's no surprises then. And in some spaces, you just don't want surprises because you want to know what's coming up, right? So what financial pulse, I think what you're asking me really is how regularly are you checking in? Every day, and do it for a year. So you almost know to the pound or dollar how much is in your bank account, but also what's coming in. In my head, I can hold, like this week, there's these pieces of business coming in. I've got this pipeline coming here and here and here. And I know the ballpark outgoings that are going to be each week as well. Even now, years and years after having built my own businesses, I have that vibe. And even though I have an accountant look after everything, I still am making sure I touch base with it, because that is the oxygen stream into the business. And if I ever lose sight of that and kind of drift off and enjoy doing like reading or something like that, whilst that may be important, I potentially lose sight of this. So I think it's important to keep your eye on that for at least a year. It's interesting to have things like goals and so on, but you should be looking at the very, very small term, because it's dangerous not to. Certainly in your first year, you don't want to be not being aware of what's in your account after, say, a week or a month or so, because you're in a dangerous place where stuff can creep in or money can creep out and you've forgotten about what's going on. So it's very, very important to do that. Hopefully that helps a bit, Laura. Ashton, hello. Daniel, hello. Hello, everyone on Instagram. I can't say hello to you all because there's so many. So let's have a look. Ozchik, I think you're from Turkey. I don't know how to say your name. Is it Asilia? Nicole, hello. Thank you for all the emojis. Ali Hassan, Matan, hello, good to see you. Chantel, lovely to see you too. I think, are we speaking later? We aren't speaking later. We're trying to organize a call. Peter as well, hello. Everyone else jumping in there too. And everyone listening on the podcast is going, could you get on with it? Because I can't see what you're looking at. So let's get on the next question. Those of you who just joined recently, there's a couple of points here. If you're not hooked up with me on LinkedIn, go to Richard James Moore, all one word. I've got the URL for that. On LinkedIn, and I'm doing 10 tips, 10 days. So tip 6 is coming out after this today, and it's for selling and communicating if you're an introvert or if you're shy or if you're nervous. The last few years, I've really found that there's hundreds of salespeople I get to work with all the time, but there are so many that have talent and an awareness and an ability to do well, but they're held back by this nerves and this fear that there's some kind of skill set they're meant to have in sales. It's not the case. If you have a way of understanding how to hack your way, that can really help. And I feel that I'd be interested in your response, actually, everyone. I'm interested in putting together my kind of philosophy for how to sell if you're maybe a bit introverted or shy. I think that creating sales that's accessible without being some kind of classical, used car sales kind of guy approach, or kind of a rah pump you up energy style selling. I think that makes things very accessible to people. And I think there's a really important niche there that's overlooked a bit. A lot of sales gurus tend to teach sales to people who are up for it and motivated and extroverted, and that doesn't necessarily help those who perhaps have a little less confidence. So that's something that's in play on LinkedIn. So do check them out and let me know what you think. Next question is from Vicky Law. Richard, I've just got off the phone with some of the founders of a new startup in my locality. They have a huge project idea that is to be the first of its kind in the country. However, now they're agitated because one of them came across a post from a potential competitor talking about the project that's strikingly familiar to theirs. I'm sure a few of you have found this as well. And they're afraid that the competition will release their app first before the guys I spoke to. I tried to assure them that this is a long question, Vicky. I tried to I'm sitting here reading it. Tried to assure them that that we could use personal branding, influencer marketing, collaboration with parallel companies as a leverage, since the supposed competition is headed by someone who's not very tech savvy and inexperienced in the online marketing and branding scene. Given the current circumstances, is their fear justified, or do they have a good chance to still dominate the market despite the supposed competition? I'm going to answer this in one sentence. It is not who is first that matters. It is who is best that matters. That's the end of the story. It is not who's first that matters, it's who's best. Was Facebook first in social media? Hell no, it wasn't them. I mean, MySpace was before them, for example, and of course then Facebook went on to win big time. It is who is best that matters. There are plenty of people who are doing, who are on LinkedIn before me, and they're maybe not doing as well as I am. It's not because they were on afterwards, it's they're not doing it as well. And it's the same here. So there's no need to worry, because here's the thing. If they start and get out first and before any other competitors, they'll be fine to start with because, hey, they were there first. But then you'll get a competitor afterwards, because the moment you do something great, someone will pick up on it. Hey, they're doing something great. Why? Because they hear the noise. And if someone is impressed with what you're doing, it's quite simple. They'll try and duplicate it or borrow parts of it. Competition is going to happen whether you like it or not, without there's very, very extreme examples possibly. But otherwise, there will always be competition. They're either there before or they're after you. You can't pay them any mind. It's important to be aware of them, but it is essential you do everything you can to be better than them. It's as simple as that. It actually reminds me of the first week when I had my first ever job. I was in a sales role. I was cold calling people back in 2002, I think it was, and I was selling internet marketing. And I remember joining, and there was someone who joined about 6 or 7 weeks before me. And, I was her competition because she had joined, and I joined kind of recently to her, and she hadn't generated any sales at that point. And so she, when I got her first sales, she saw me then as a bit of a threat. And it's like, I overtook her in the end. I was looking for the next person. And my kind of attitude was, I'm going to hunt you down. I had the hunger and I was wanting to work my way up the board. And it's a case of saying, like, if I don't have any skill, I'll outwork you. And it was just everything I could do to outperform anyone who was above me on that leaderboard. And I did that just because I wanted to be better than the rest of them, because that's just how I was back then. And it was nothing to do with if I was better at the job or because I'd been there earlier. I just put more time against it. So the thing is, your clients, Vicky, they might be first to market. They may even have a superior product, but then a competitor comes along and just outworks them. And there's so many people I know I've beaten out to close a sale over. So competitors who are, if we're both pitching a business for a piece of business, I know I've outperformed them purely because I just went the extra mile. I remember once, this would have been about 7 or 8 years ago, visiting a client in Copenhagen, and I was on the way to Zurich. So from London to Copenhagen, then all the way down to Switzerland, I just kind of as a stopover, I had a meeting for an hour in the airport at Copenhagen. And this guy, the CEO of this, it was a kind of a medical device business, let's just call it. Basically, this guy was like, I can't believe that you're flying to Zurich and you decide to stop off here for this 1 hour meeting with me. No one does that. And he brought his CFO in and said, this guy's flown all the way over just to meet with us. And I said, but the difference is if no one else is going to do that, it means I'm more likely positioned. He was like, hell yes. The fact is you care. And that's how we won that particular piece of business. So you've got to understand it's about who's best and who wants it the most. It's not about who starts earlier or later. Stop focusing on the fact there might be competitors. Get over it. That's called life. It means you've got an interesting space. It's validation that you're probably working in a good place because there's other people wanting to join into the party as well. But you know, you need to go hard on all the things you mentioned. It all makes sense: personal branding, influencer marketing, and so on. And focus on doing it better than anyone else. Show up earlier, stay later, be there for longer, give them extra love, care more, all of those basics. You get that, Vicky. But yeah, hopefully that helps a lot. It's a really good question. Bethany Hodgson, that's definitely me. I think you were referring to the sales skills. So that's good. We should talk more if that's the case. Aziz Selman, as an introvert, I find logic useful when it comes to sales and communication. Absolutely can be the case. Ashton White, if you can be duplicated, someone will always beat you. It's an interesting point, actually. Sometimes it's what makes you unique that makes you so exciting. And you know, let's try and be useful here. One thing I've done, going back to that question, Zach, is instead of trying to scale myself completely, is say, well, you know what? I can't work with everyone. I get that. So let's be choosy. Let's pick only a few people I can work with so I can fill my day with those and make it worth your while. Maybe you charge a bit more for it, or maybe you pick particular types of people you want to work with. So everyone is an absolute joy, rather than when you first start and you just got to say yes to everyone, right? So sometimes you're not going to scale yourself, so make it worth your while. Simple as that. Zach Houston, for Vicky, the client. Who's the client? The client who's concerned of competition. If there's competition, it's healthy, and if they're validated the idea, exactly right. Investors get scared if you don't have competition. Also a good point as well. Thank you, Zach. Let's go on to another question. So where was it? Bethany Hodgson. How do you know how much to reinvest into a business? Is there too much after a certain length of time? Good question. So my philosophy. The thing is, you've got to understand, I'm a massive stoic, okay? I will put off instant pleasure as long as I can to get the long-term win. I'm all about the pain, and I'm cool with it. And that's a kind of something I've conditioned myself to. And it's so worth it because you get so much more. And there's the saying, you know, if you can hold your breath. So just like, you know, so many people, they get their first win with their startup and it's all bling and fast cars and stupid things like that. And, you know, fine, if they're desperate to, but the reality is you're not then necessarily using the money. To answer your question directly, how do you know how much to reinvest into a business? It's as much as you possibly can to start with. I just feel that, you know, it's fascinating. I've had this saying for ages now, you can always live on less than you realize. Okay, or you need less than you realize. You know, when I started my business, I reined it right in, and the household made very little income because I thought that's all we need, and the rest needs to stay in the business. The longer you can go without, the better. And if you think about people like Tony Hsieh, right? So the founder of Zappos, the shoe business that was bought by Amazon for $1 billion, when they were really starting to roll in it, he was still on something like I think it was $36,000 salary a year. That was it. Okay. Jeff Bezos was taking something like $80,000 a year with a multi-billion-dollar business. I know his net worth and everything, but he was just like, let's just take what I need. And he was very much the stoic. You could see if you read The Everything Store by Brad Stone, you can see that in action. I strongly feel that if you can just hold off as much as possible, just take what you need to get by. It sucks to start with, but after a while, you start getting the hang of it. It just means all that money can stay with the business. You can scale faster, then you can start paying yourself sooner. And it's nice because that approach has meant that I've been able to give myself more pay rises and more, you know, help bring more people onto the payroll because I can grow it faster. So choose company growth over large salaries for yourself, okay, or large dividends or however you're paying yourself. Is there too much after a certain amount of time? No, I don't think so. I think that it gets to a point though where you want to be more comfortable, and I get that. It comes to a point, and there's a great way of describing it, when your company's gone from you have to keep financing it to it can wipe its own face. And when your own company can wipe its own face, as in it can pay all its own bills without you throwing money in it all the time, you can then move to a place where it's like, actually, the company's doing really well, we're growing really well, things are growing nicely. I can take a bit more out of here. I can afford to be a bit more comfortable. But even then, I just there's the power of broke, as Damon Green or whatever his name was has talked about, and you know, being hungry. One of the best motivators, or one of the best reasons why people really grow fast is when there's real hunger there. A necessity can drive you to really work your face off when you need something to happen. And either that's because of money or because you just buy into it. You work so hard for it. And I never want to be in a position where I'm comfortable. And it's fascinating that I could easily do that, but I know that I would lose my edge. And so as much as is possible, I try and often seek ways to kind of push myself into that slightly uncomfortable position where maybe I haven't got quite as much as I could have. And it's nice. I mean, there's properties, there's cars, there's family, things like that. And everyone gets paid, but I try and make sure I eat last. So the leaders eat last kind of thing is a philosophy I share quite a lot. Everyone's different though. Bethany, you might want more balance than that. And there's no wrong or right. There's just what feels good. But don't put your business in danger in order to pay yourself more than you need. Okay? If you have to survive with a certain amount of money, then you need to take that. I get it. But you need to, my view is always to treat the business like it's almost a family member. Because if you can do that, then people are likely to or rather, you're likely to spend the right amount of time with your business. You care about it enough and you touch it regularly enough. You should be in touch with it with your brain. I mean, you should be in touch with it. You should be thinking about it as much across a day as a member of family. And I have no problem saying that at all. So, you know, you think about each member of your family, but also the business is like an extension of that as well. If you have that kind of approach, then you'll care enough to give it everything like you would a family member. Imagine having a baby of 2 years old or something. You give them everything they ever need. If they need something at 4 a.m, they get it. And that's kind of how it should be with a business to start with as well. That's, I believe, genuinely the reason why so many startups fail, up to 90% in some industries. It's because there's just not enough kind of attention given. If it was a newborn baby, you'd be all over that. You'd be everything it ever needed, but the business, you're not invested enough. So I think that if you could give as much as you can, and that may well mean in reinvesting, then fine. But, you know, it's not just about money, Bethany, because you really opened up an important point here. It's also about your time. You know, it's so tempting to go, oh, it'd be great, I'll do 9 to 5, or maybe I'll do less. No, it's like you do less. Go back to that analogy. You do less for your children in terms of time and investment of yourself as they get older, you know, when they're 15 or 25. And the joke is that you never stop being a parent. You know, if your children are 40, you're still giving them handouts or looking after them or giving them advice and things like that. But it's probably not every 2 minutes of the day. Whereas when they were very young, you had to think for them. And it's the same for the business. The business will get to the point where it can start looking after you, but you have to nurture it like you were a child. And it may sound cheesy, but that's just my view on it. And I think if I'm thinking always, like in a quiet moment, I'm thinking of my children or my wife or my family or my close friends, but I'm also thinking of my business at the same amount of time. I think that's an important consideration. It's an important way to look at it. And if you don't care, well, it's probably the wrong business you're in. Okay, so that's a really good question because you open up a huge amount of great questions there. Thank you very much. Just see if there's any other questions here. Alex Mirapo Hara, I have a different philosophy on investment. Invest as little as possible while meeting needs. Keep as lean as possible, as long as possible. A startup business can always absorb all that it can. Yeah, this is slightly different to my point, but I 100% agree here with Alex. What she's saying is stay lean as a business. Eric Ries, The Lean Startup, is a very good book. It's a classic already, but it's a really good book on this. Your business will survive and thrive with less investment than you realize. Okay, in that you can barter and give value instead of cash for certain services. Okay. A bit more application and industry on your side, a bit more hard work means you often don't have to outsource and spend $1,000 on someone doing certain things for you, because you actually could do it yourself, because you actually do have that time. So I think staying lean is important, and simultaneously reinvesting as much as you can is a good idea. But all the first things first is you've got to make sure you can survive yourself. But thereafter, think carefully about starting to buy the big gold chains if the business represents a very, very impoverished person. So think about that, have that balance right. Next question, Andrew Hall has asked, Richard, how do you know when to sell and how? Okay, it's a huge question. So you know when to, I wonder if you're asking when to close or when to sell. You should be selling in a variety of ways of doing it, but selling from the beginning. In fact, the real answer is you should start selling before the beginning. So with my 8-Step Startup course back in 2015, I was pre-selling this course before it was even released. So people had already paid to be an early adopter and a beta tester, if you like. And as it was being built, they had access to it as the sessions were being added. So that selling wasn't me just closing them in the short term, but it was also closing them in the long term, just sharing good noise in content and marketing about the world I was in. But you've also asked how to sell in general, I think. There's so many ways of doing it, but I do strongly feel that in 2018, because you've got the social platforms, it pays to share great news on great value about your world and get people feeling, hey, that's a really good guy, I trust them. And then when you come to ask, or sometimes you don't even need to because they ask themselves, they find you, they check you out because they love your stuff, then selling is very effortless. I'd like to think I'm a good example of this. LinkedIn, if I go back to, so for instance, last week, there's so much traffic, so many views of the posts and things like that. And so now I'm starting to see people buying courses, because what they're doing is they're reading the content each day going, wow, that's really good. Let's see who this Richard guy is. They check the profile. Oh, he's got these products. Let me have a look at his website. Yeah, I'll have some of that, please. And then they're buying it. So that's in my opinion, the best way of selling is actually not selling in the classic sense. It's just sharing great things about you. Do that right, and you don't have to ask ever again. You just position yourself with zero friction, as is known, so then people can come and find you. Okay, this is the LinkedIn course. It's about to be released in a week. I literally am going to explain in that course. I do explain in that course exactly how it works, and that'll be launched next week on Monday. In the Q&A, episode 99 of the Q&A, and anyone watching, if they want it, they will get a special early adopter price on it. But it will be on the site very soon as well. But that's important, because I think, if I try and be a bit more practical for you as well, how do you sell? Yes, through good content, but that is a very long-term play because people have to build up trust. What I do think is more medium-term play is being involved in the conversation. You know, so all the people here on Facebook who are dropping comments in, it's important to then go back and speak with them. Everyone on LinkedIn who comments on your post, go and engage with all of them. Seriously, it's time. Every day when there's like 60 comments, you have to respond to them all. And then, this is the hard bit no one wants to do, but this is the leverage point. Then you go to other people's content. And then you write comments on their content as well. Right? So when you do that, you really become part of the community. And then there's trust. And then people want to have you, they want to kind of see what you're doing. They want to buy your stuff. They give you the benefit of the doubt. It's called positioning. What happens is they're positioning you, or rather they're positioned to view in a positive light. So if you ever did ask for anything, they'd be all over it because you're a good person, or at least you're worth considering. Okay. So you never want to lead with the direct sell. It's a bad idea, especially in 2018. because what's happened is we've all been through this period of several years now where being gamed at and adverts being thrown at us, and there's a lot of heavy marketing that we're all getting a bit bored of it. And in fact, we were some time ago. And so you need a bit more finesse, which is all going all full circle to engage with the individual, which is how selling used to happen a very long time ago. Okay, so it was engaging with the individual one by one. That's tough. But what you do is if you do that enough, then those individuals then start liking you and sharing things about you. And that creates word of mouth. And of course, then a reputation, people then start talking about you more. And that's how you start winning faster. Let's do one or two more questions. So Judy Fox, hello, Judy. You've asked, do you have a VA or a team that works for you? Yes, I do. What I've done, though, is I've got kind of an ecosystem, if you like. So rather than having, there's a couple of us who are on payroll, but actually rather than that, I've got a number of people who are kind of freelancing. So they do their bit, but they also tend to run their own businesses doing their own thing as well. So you have people who are involved with web development or social media or production and things like that. And each of them has their own kind of component covered. I think that's a good way of doing it, because then you have, we've got this, I talked about this recently on LinkedIn with someone called Kira Day, this idea of called the value ecosystem, I call it, where you've got loads of people over time getting paid really well and being able to thrive in their own super micro niche, meaning it's tiny little niche. There's one area that they're really good at and they get plucked out to do their thing really well. Great example is, there's people on Facebook, for instance, and their only thing they do, but they do so well, is email campaigns or Facebook ads or whatever it might be. They're really good at that one thing. So if you want to engage with someone to help you with that area, I have that kind of ecosystem. So there's maybe like 8 or 9 people in total who kind of help with different areas. And I think that's a really good way of working. But going back to Alex's point earlier, it's certainly very lean as well. That's a good way of doing it. So Judy, yeah, good question. But there is that ecosystem there. And I think when you realize that if you work with other people rather than trying to do it on your own, that frees up so much of your time. It's amazing how much you can do. It's so liberating. So I invite you to do it if you're not already. Some kind of an assistant or VA, even if it's automated, like getting a calendar, if it makes sense for you, that kind of thing can really make the difference. Handling, even little things like handling payments, have it all done by Stripe through my website rather than someone email me. Hi, I would like to buy this course, and going through a process of closing, automating the lot, including setting them up and logging them out. I know it sounds simple these days, but having that kind of mechanism there is so simple, and it just means that element is outsourced and looked after. Unless there's any more questions on Facebook, let me see if there's one. I'll do one more here if I can find one. So Daniel Nunes, what 3 essential tips would you give to a professional trying to succeed in their given industry? Well, like I mentioned earlier, engage, be part of the community. So you need to, one of the big wins that people aren't really taking advantage of is because we're all social, we're all always talking all the time about what we do. And because also social platforms are good at grouping us into tribes or cliques or groups, like an entrepreneur business group, for instance, there are places you can go, very easily found places you can go, where you've got a group of people who would buy your thing, right? Or be interested in your service. And all you've got to do is show up every day and talk about your stuff. And then people, it happened literally this morning, someone on LinkedIn had written a post about a sales call. And then I got a comment underneath that was, Richard would love your views on this, because they know that I'm involved in that space. And so you kind of get the reputation. But how did that happen? Through having conversations and being there on the ground. So many people want the hack. So many people want to be able to cut a corner and like, how do I just reach people and get people to buy from me? You've just got to spend the time on the pitch actually with real people and doing the conversations, and then you'll get there. It's so many people don't want to do it or can't be bothered because it's 2 hours of their day. So you lose, sorry. But the nice thing is it's very simple to do. You've just got to choose to do that. And again, show up every single day. I think that's one important one. I think another one as well is maybe bring variety. If you're trying to succeed in your given industry, a bit like I mentioned earlier, it's a really important thing to bring a number of different facets of what you do. So for instance, if you're going to be a content marketer and you want to lead that into something, don't just post the same old stuff. I made that mistake probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I was posting 3, maybe 2 similar types of posts each day, and it was like, yeah, it kind of worked, but then it got a bit dull. So you need to kind of bring your own edge, sure, but bring a variety of different mediums, so that you got Instagram live here, but then you've got stories, then you've got the post, then you've got campaigns. On Facebook, it's not just me, there's the page, there's the group, and on the group there's the kind of the new campaign of the people doing the Facebook hijack, for example, and all these different things just keep things interesting. People get bored, no matter how great you are. If your entire world is just posting motivational memes on Instagram, even that's for the people who love that stuff. It's like, oh, it's the same old stuff. So variety is important there, I think, as well. But then the other thing as well is patience and consistency, a combination of the two. So don't just kind of hang in there thinking eventually you'll get somewhere. Be consistent in the sense that you are showing up every single day. And I think just make peace with the fact that you're in it not just to win in the next 6 months or something, or be a millionaire by the end of the year. Sure, they're nice things to drive yourself, but be willing to accept that this is it now. This is how you'll be. This is how you're going to work. And that's open-ended indefinitely as far as you can ever do it. And if you kind of get used to that, you hunker down and say, I'm going to then enjoy it. And I think when you do that, you realize that time will then pass. And as you spend time on the pitch all the time doing it, then what happens is people start, showing you some attention because you're showing up, but also you learn where you need to pivot and maybe change direction and so on. And eventually something will happen, or a few things will happen, and you'll be off, you'll fly. But it can't happen unless you're showing up all the time. So that consistency really important as well. So engage in the community, bring variety, and that consistency also. Any other questions at all? I don't think so. Maybe one actually from Daniel Nunes, the CEO on Facebook. Yes, there is. So how do you draw boundaries and ensure you're fulfilling donors' expectations? Because you run a non-profit, I think, don't you? While in maintaining integrity to the mission. Let's say you're introduced to someone willing to provide workspace, connections to funding and training, etc. Okay, good. However, you're not quite comfortable with some of the organizations they're part of. Do you take the offer? It's a good question. Let me read that last bit again. Let's say you're introduced to someone willing to provide workspace, connections or funding and training and so on. However, you're not comfortable with the organizations they're part of. Do you take the offer? Here's the thing. You've got to ask yourself, Daniel, is it that they are unethical, okay? Or is it just you? You just not quite get on with the guy. You don't like him that much or something like that. Because that's important. It might be just like you just don't dig them, or they're into stuff you don't care about, but that's just you and it's just subjectivity. If it's unethical, well, I can't condone you working with them. I wouldn't bother. I'm sure there are other people who can provide a workspace and connections to funding and training. And if you're any good, there will be. People will be forthcoming. So just think there's plenty more people out there. Just remember as well that sometimes it's just, you know what, it might just be you. But yeah, like I say, if they are unethical or they're not there, there's something dodgy there, don't get wrapped up in it. One thing I've learned is if you are genuine and honest and have integrity, okay, it often takes you longer to get somewhere great than people who go for the fast win by doing something dodgy. But I promise you, I've seen so many people fall because they took the quick win, but they compromised their integrity. And they did something that was a bit dodgy. And the guy I'm thinking of in my mind, I'm not going to mention the name, but the guy I'm thinking of in my mind that I was introduced to several years ago, and he was fascinating to watch to see how he manipulated and worked with marketing and things like that. But he's no one now, in the sense that he's disappeared and the reputation is in tatters. Because when I don't know, that's not public, but when you speak to people who are involved with him, they're like, what an idiot. And he was, he just ruined his reputation quite a bit. And I just think, have that integrity. And I remember so many people were like, oh, why don't you do this? Or Richard, if you tried this, it would get you a big level up. I'm like, I'm not doing it. I want to do things the right way. And it's worth it because in the end you get payback. Maybe it's karma or something. I don't know. But the point is, if you do it the right way, have a bit of integrity, it's the right thing to do. So Daniel, hope that helps you with your decision. If it's unethical or they're dodgy or something that's not right, you potentially going to be caught up in trouble by association. If it's just you and you don't like the person, get over yourself and take advantage of a wonderful offer. But otherwise, there's plenty out there, I'm sure. I think I'll draw a line there on the questions. So thank you so much, everyone who jumped in. Any questions I haven't answered, I do apologize and I'll get to you. I know there's something like 20 questions who came through on Facebook. If you're not connected with me on Facebook, it's facebook.com/richardmoore.official. And you can search also for the group, Entrepreneur Business Group. And it's free, 3,500 people there. And we're doing the live hijacks today, starting in about half an hour, I think it is, with Lewis Clack. Dr. Lewis Clack has recently qualified here in the UK. So do join in there for the next 10 days. And the other thing is hop onto LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/Richard James Moore, MWRE. And I'm doing 10 tips across 10 days on sales for introvert. It's been so good speaking, Joel. Thank you so much. Thanks for all of the attention, those of you on YouTube and Facebook and on Instagram. And thanks to everyone who's listening on the podcast as well. Have a wonderful week, and I'll catch you all really soon. Cheerio, Instagram. And see you later, everyone, on YouTube and on Facebook. Thank you, as always, everyone, for being so active there. I will get through. I know that some of the questions I missed because there's just so many, but I'll get around to all of you as soon as possible. If you are in the Entrepreneur Business Group now, please hop over straight away. I think it's, or in the next, say, 10, 15 minutes, and support Lewis Clack doing the first live hijack if you can. And I'll see you all in there. Take care. What is it?